Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to MIHOA Live, a very special episode with the one and only NHL retired referee Don Koharski. There he is, and our special guest host Todd Lewis, who's co-host of Scouting the Ref podcast. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Really good. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, nice to be with you guys too. This will be fun.
Well, thank you so very much. Koho, you and I know each other for a few years, had the pleasure of working with your son, Jamie, several times. I think we rode up to Springfield, Illinois one time and maybe bought a sandwich at Wendy's together.
Yeah.
I probably should have treated, but I think you did, honestly.
Yeah, I know I did.
Yeah, but thank you so much. And Todd, I've really enjoyed listening to your podcasts. As we were saying before we came on, you have the face for radio, it looks like.
Thank you very much.
But we're really excited to have you here because I'm just an amateur hockey referee, an average, maybe above average hockey referee who likes to talk hockey. And I just started these live broadcasts a couple of weeks ago, and they've really got some traction. And I think we're going to have a lot of people watching today. So without further ado, I'm going to let Todd, you kind of introduce yourselves and lead us off. All right, Todd?
Wow. Okay. That's it. I've been passed the baton, Koho. So it's just you and me for a little while. Andy is going to hang around though, of course, because you've generated an awful lot of talk and discussion. And if you want questions answered, feel free to submit them. Andy will jump in with the questions, but we're looking forward to more of this and Andy stepped out of the video and everything right now. So it is just you and me. Don, it's nice to talk to you. I've seen your work for many years. Well, not recently, but I've seen your work for many years and had a lot to say to you, but now I get to say it in person, I guess.
Yeah, just be kind what you say.
No problem. Hey,
I hope
now
at least a couple of those nights you see me work, I was okay because I wasn't very good. So
you don't stay in the league for 25 years as an on-ice official unless you were pretty good, and get to work a whole bunch of Stanley Cups unless you were pretty good. Do you feel a sense of accomplishment for your career? I think you should.
Yeah, when I look back now that I've been off the ice for 11 years, when I look back at it and you're doing your final game or you're doing a milestone game, and then people start talking about it and you're getting, you're starting to see your own accolades in the papers or you're hearing about them. Cause I was never one, when I walked off the ice, my last game, I'm not sure if I could have told you how many games that was, but yeah, no, it's, I look back and it was 25 years as a referee, but there was another 7 that I got hired as a linesman. So I actually started in 72. So it's been a 32-year career, and then 10 years in middle management as a supervisor and officiating manager. And then I thought I retired again after last season, not this present one. And then Stephen Walcom was kind enough to ask me if I'd come back and maybe do some part-time work as a mentor and a coach. And I said, absolutely. It's been my whole life. So yeah, but I look back, yeah, I take some great pride in, with what I've accomplished. I've been a very lucky, privileged guy.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because you should take pride in it. One of the things I've gotten to learn more about officials and referees, as Andy mentioned, I'm a co-host on the Scouting the Refs podcast, which is so much fun. It started as a radio segment he and I did a number of years ago, and we've evolved it this year. But what I've come to learn is there's a tremendous a brotherhood, association, however you want to phrase it, with officials, in that you're always trying to help one another. You're trying to help grow the fraternity. You're trying to help teach and mentor, as you say, and that's got to be something that gives you great satisfaction.
Well, I mean, it's just, you're right, and and I know you're referencing amateur hockey right up to the National Hockey League level. We're a real good fraternity at the National League level, because we're very humble individuals for the most part, and we don't forget our humble beginnings. So when we see those young officials out there, we want to make them a part of our fraternity. Who knows, during and it won't ever happen, but during a CBA, like the old days when we weren't very good at our collective bargaining agreement, we always called on those young guys not to walk the line, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, no, we take great pride in our fraternity, male, female, from the youngest official that's alive today, right up to our most senior guys on our staff. It's a good.
It really is, and that's, you see the giving back in the sense of like with Andy, who I got to know in learning about the Tim Peel's camp and the other camps, is that this is something that you do, is you're accessible, you want to help coach, you want to help teach, so that they can develop, and you don't run into difficulties getting officials, because that's become a bit of an issue in some places too.
Yes, no, it's and it's right. I mean, then there's the list goes on for who runs their camps. Our guys, Steve Kozari used to do it out west, Brad Lazarowicz. I mean, we can name a dozen of our guys that if they're not running their own camps, they're working at our camps that we're running, just to give back, as you referenced. The second part, the retention level, is a real concern now around the world with our officials at the amateur level. But you know what, we start trying to make it fun for them again, and we start showing a little more passion for them, then hopefully those numbers get better and we're able to retain them, educate them, and develop with them as we go along. Just there's so many great numbers and not enough people to do it.
Sure. Let's bring Andy back in for a second. Andy, tell us if you got any questions you want to throw them in, or if you can tell people where you can see this video, because I know it's being distributed very widely today.
Yeah, well, thank you, Todd. Great job so far, and Koho, thank you again for being here. And yeah, we're on MIHOA.com/live right now. We have a YouTube channel that we started a number of years ago, and not only do we do these live broadcasts, but we'll put different videos up there, maybe showing clips from some of our games as a learning opportunity for some of our officials, or fun stuff. We had a really talented 17-year-old kid who killed it in his level 4 skating exam, Koho, and so we put a video up there of him doing that. I'm looking at the live broadcast right now. We got several people watching live, which is great, and I see one of our young officials from here in Missouri, Vaughn Upton, has already chimed in. So Vaughn, thanks for watching. He's one of our talented young officials. I think he's about 19 or 20 years old. He's already working some of the junior B game. Well, it's not B anymore, Koho, but the St. Louis Junior Blues that play out of Afton. He's already worked some of those games. I know you're familiar with that group.
Good for him. Good for you, Vaughn.
Yeah.
Don Koharski, I want to ask you about a whole bunch of things over your career, and you said that nothing was off limits. We can talk about some stories and stuff. The first
truth
thing
might be off limits, but
okay, fair enough. I'll ask the questions, you answer them as you see fit, which is kind of the way officials work, isn't it? You may disagree with them, but you'll get an answer.
It's just good game management skills. In this case, podcast management.
There you go. I want to ask about Stanley Cup Finals, because you worked a number of them over I want to say 12, but I'm not sure that that's correct. But
it's 11.
It's 11? I was pretty close. So, and if I recall, one of the first ones was the Calgary-Montreal final in 1986. And just the great, amazing run that the Canadiens made that year that went on to capture the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and I was the kind of cool thing we talked earlier. You don't know much about your own stats, but looking back, I was my first year in the league full time as a referee after I did a stint as a linesman for 2.5 years, and I went to the minor leagues. This was my apprenticeship as a referee. That was my second year full time in the NHL as a referee.
Wow.
My first year, I did 3 out of 4 rounds in my rookie year. And honestly, I didn't know this stuff until well, decades later. Yeah, and that was my second year in the league. And, I grew up in Dartmouth, north end of Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. And for the Americans that are listening, that's in the east coast of Canada on the Atlantic Ocean. And all we watched was the Montreal Canadiens. That's all we watched on Wednesday and Saturday nights. And so you had to become a Montreal Canadian fan. And then I think my first game was in Montreal. And then here I am, my first Stanley Cup final, and I'm with the Cornways of the world and the Montreal Canadiens. And I think I was a little starstruck the first 10 or 15 minutes of my first game, which was in Montreal, game 2. But that's a memorable year for me, for my family, my extended family, and my friends. Yeah, that was pretty cool. really, really cool.
We always hear the players afterwards saying that the difficulty it is to go through the 4 rounds of playoffs to get through and win a Stanley Cup, or the disappointment on the other side. You get to see that firsthand when you're out on the ice officiating. I don't know if you can describe what you see in the sense that these are players that are giving everything they absolutely have.
Well, I mean, to that note too, the officials for 4 rounds, we're grinding pretty good. We're competing hard.
I'm not trying to take away from you at all, man.
So, I mean, you get focused on that, but you're right. You do see, and that's what makes our game, our playoffs, I think very, very special. It's come the playoffs. It's a man's game. It was a man's game in the 70s and the 80s. It's a man's game now. It's a different game come the playoffs. And you just see the players that are peaking at their best. Fitness level, cardio, and it's just all out. I mean, there's just, it's a dog race to win 16 hockey games. And I'll tell you what, they need that 3.5 months for those bodies to rest. I mean, St. Louis, we're here with Andy from St. Louis, the Blues. A lot of the times you'll see the team that won the Stanley Cup will come back the next year. They're off to a bit of a slow start.
Yeah.
Well, their bodies haven't really recovered yet from that run they have, and they just sacrifice everything. It's like I'd be out there saying, what are you doing throwing your face in front of a towel in a splash? Well, I want to win the Stanley Cup, and this is what I have to do. And then you really see the team side of it come out too, Todd.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you look down the bench and you're looking at your team and you're going, you know what, we can go pretty deep. We have the skill set here, the talent to go pretty deep. Then they all buy in, and then it's game on. Yeah, it's so cool. So cool to be involved with it. You can't even put words to explain it.
And that's what we see so often, isn't it, Andy? When you witness the players after a game, it's just like I don't even have the words to describe it. How are we doing? If we have any questions? If you have questions out there, feel free to throw them in.
Yeah, again, welcome everybody that's watching. Again, it's Andy Hudson with MIHOA, and we've got Todd Lewis here, co-host of Scouting the Refs podcast, and of course Don Koharski, who's telling a bunch of stories and lies tonight or today. I'm just kidding, Koho. I'm kidding, Koho.
No.
Okay, no, but we do have some other people tuning in, and Vaughn Upton corrected me and said it's called the NA3HL now. Not the Junior B, Koho. So it's NA3HL. I forgot about that. But Roger is tuning in from Champaign, Illinois. We got Andrew coming at us from Chicago. And here's Bob Cohen, who's a longtime local referee here in St. Louis. And he says, hey there, Huddy. They all call me Huddy. Wondering what his, being your Koho, favorite donut is, and if he ever got along with Schoenfeld after their confrontation. You knew that would come up.
Oh, I'm surprised Todd hadn't gone there yet.
I was gonna get to it because tomorrow, May the 6th, is the anniversary of that incident.
32 years tomorrow. 32 years tomorrow. Yeah. No. Favorite one apparently was day old Boston Creams. So I was told. And yes, Jim Schoenfeld is an absolutely wonderful human being. People got to understand in a short form is that we talked about playoffs, emotions. We talked about refs a little bit, talked a lot about the players, but the coaches, they're there. They got to show their emotions. They got to show their support to their team. And at the end of the day, that's what that whole ugly situation was about, was him showing support for his team when they just got embarrassed on home ice. And as officials, if you're out there and you're listening as officials, that's a skill set that you need to try to get in your toolboxes, is growing that thick skin and knowing that fine line of personal and emotional. I knew the fine line that he was on the emotional side of it until the bitter end, then it got personal. But, until then, that's what we got to learn as young officials. We have to grow a thick skin, good sense of humor. Now think about the story we're talking about. Thick skin, good sense of humor, and a short memory. And you will succeed in officiating on those 3 little tips.
There were so many lessons that can be learned that came out of that that particular incident. And you demonstrated one perfectly when you show your sense of humor. You can laugh about it all these years later. And I was going to ask, but it doesn't appear as if this incident bothers you or upsets you at all as being one of the first things that people will mention when we're talking about Don Koharski, who had this outstanding NHL career. And oh yeah, you remember that, but I guess you remember the moments.
Yeah, you know what? There's good moments, there's bad moments. The bad ones, you try to spin it into something positive. I mean, we live, all of us, we live in such a hostile environment for 8.5 months of our year, traveling the different rinks, whether it's in your local state championships. We just got to find that way to spin something bad into good. You know, and a lot of good things did come for that. And I go on record and I say that respectfully about that it was a fun thing. I mean, it was a very serious,
sure.
And I had a very black mark on the National Hockey League that night and the following days to come. But I'll tell you what, and I've said it publicly, from that day on and that situation on, we, the National Hockey League, bar none, have the best in-house security for our players, officials, and our fans. We're undoubtedly the best security, in my opinion, of the 4 major sports. And I got to think that had something to do with it. It was an eye-opener. And our security department is unbelievable for our athletes, our officials, and our fans in our sport.
There is so much that goes on in how the games are conducted and what it takes to operate a game. And a lot of fans, I think, just don't know and just don't get to see it up close. But one of the things that we've talked about is if you're at a game in particular, it's easier. But if you're watching on television, you can do it a little bit, but try to spend a little time watching the officials and what they're doing when a play is going on. One of the things that you'll notice is after a goal is scored and there's a celebration, everybody runs the bench and does the high fives now. One of the linesmen gets over between the benches to make sure there's no shenanigans, little things like that often go unseen.
The devil is in the detail.
Yep.
When it comes to officiating. And those are the little things that'll make you a little bit better than the guy maybe you're working with at the level. He pays attention to the little things. He does the small things during stoppages, the fundamentals, the mechanics of the game. But yes, I like your point because everything's happening in real time up there. Nanos of seconds.
Yeah.
Just on occasions, I sat in the stands one night about a quarter way into this hockey season, beside some hockey fans. And that was maybe the 15th or 16th home game of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And the guy turned to me, he says, how come the linesmen are taking the face off after the goals now? He said, is that the first game they're doing that? I said, have you been? Oh yeah. He said, I don't miss a game. He said, but I seen you taking notes and I knew who you were. So I thought I'd ask you, but that's the first time I'd noticed it. I said, well, no, that was a change this year. So just those little things that you can pick up on, you may have a little bit better understanding on how skilled our guys are in tight corners, tight situations.
No question.
Yeah,
And
that's a good point, Todd.
They do a lot of things that go unnoticed. Andy Hudson, of course, is the one who organized this. If you want to jump in, Andy, and let us know who else is watching and listening, and if there's additional questions that you want to lay in, please fire away. Don's here, and he said anything you want to talk about is. The
question you don't ask is the only dumb one.
Okay, so anything goes, Koho. All right. Well, one of our veteran officials is watching, Mark Pecoraro. I don't know if you remember Mark, Koho.
I remember.
Yeah, and he asks, you may not be able to answer this question, but he asked, does Koho think that the NHL season will resume? And maybe we probably don't know the answer to that, but how long will it take the officials to get back in game shape if it does resume?
Well, hopefully we're all sports fans of all the sports, and we're hoping that they all get back playing again. I don't know if we ever will. I know that's a plan to have that happen. How it's going to roll out, I'm just like you guys out there. I read the papers, watch, social media and that, but no, but our officials will be ready to go. They train at home. We've been doing a fun thing on Mondays and Tuesdays with our guys through video. And our guys are getting rules quizzes. They're getting videos. We're working a lot on their fundamentals and mechanics. They're helping Stephen Walcom and his staff, us, our team, build a library of things that we can have. So when we do go back and they're asked to keep their fitness level, Dave Smith, our fitness guy for our guys, sending out stuff constantly on different workouts, cardios, and I know our guys, because they're going to have 3 weeks left of regular season. I do believe we will play the regular season out, and these are competitive 3 weeks for our guys to make our playoff team. So we have 34 referees and 34 linesmen, and only 20 on each side make the active playoff team to work the Stanley Cup playoffs. So anyone that's not out there working on their condition and their fitness, they're going to fall a step behind, and they might be left behind in the selection.
Wow, that's a great point, that everyone's so focused on, well, what's going to happen with the season? Is it going to be the regular season? Is it going to be playoffs? But there are playoff positions available for officials as well, be it working the lines or working as a referee. And that's a big deal. I mean, it's nice to have a little bonus money, but that's a big deal for refs and linesmen to be selected and chosen to work in the playoffs, isn't it, Don? That's a point of pride.
Oh, listen, it's not about the money at all. I can attest that it was never about the money. It was just about your hard work, getting rewarded for your hard work from those 75 plus games you did on the road, and getting that reward, getting that email 2 days after the regular season and seeing your name on the starting lineup that you've made the playoffs. And even though, a guy like Wes McCauley might have worked the last 5 or 6 Stanley Cup final, his slate is clean come September, October next year. He's got to go out and compete. He's got to upkeep the standard. He's as tasked as much as a first-year kid is on our staff. So
whether it be, since you mentioned Wes McCauley, and he is so good at making announcements in the building, what penalties are. The personality is one part of it, but which we all love and we'd love to see more of. But that's a key component for referees, isn't it? To have that authoritative, not necessarily you have to be the loudest or the brashest, but you have to control the game. And sometimes it's done subtly, sometimes it's done with a little more force.
Yeah, and it's all about your demeanor,
your
presence. Sometimes nothing said and a little glare or a little like that at a player, he'll know when to shut it down. And sometimes that's more powerful than engaging in a yelling and screaming match with them. But again, that's a skill set. That's earned, that's experience. And Wes is very good at it. We got lots of guys good at it, but Wes and Chris Rooney's of the world and Dan O'Halloran's, those guys are the face of our game right now. So we still have our character guys. We still have some character guys out there, some throwbacks from the 70s and 80s, even though some of them weren't born then, but that's okay.
Oh, no, just now, do you, because you know and have experienced the difference, officials, should they have the names on the back, or do you like the numbers, or do you want both?
In our day, there's the big talk now is the lack of communication skills between the players and our officials, where that was never an issue back in our day in the 70s and the 80s and into the 90s. I always liked the number. I mean, I played all my sports. My number was 12. 12's all over my golf cart right now in my garage. I wake up at 12 in the middle of the night to go to the washroom for some crazy reasons. But I personally, I like the numbers. I like the numbers. I think we're a team. We're the 32nd team in the National Hockey League. And you know what? When you see our guys out there with their numbers and you see the two teams with their numbers, I just think it's a cool look. I really do. To my other point was, back in our day, the teams didn't charter.
Right.
So when you had Toronto playing in St. Louis on a Saturday night, we'd all go to the same establishments and have a sandwich and a refreshment, and the team, the single guys from the home team would be in that establishment. The visiting team, we'd be there. You might have just given somebody a misconduct, or had a real good screening match with them like we could do back in the day. Like the boards behind you there where there was no advertising on them.
Right.
And no microphones. So we built, funny enough, we built a good rapport and a relationships with those guys away from the game. And they seen our passion, our love for the game, and how much we cared about the game too. Our guys are missing that in today's game because Toronto plays in St. Louis now. They get on their charter, they leave St. Louis, probably getting on a charter to go to Chicago somewheres. So we're missing that. And I think that's the big reason it's a little more difficult now. Plus microphones, you got to be more careful with media, what you say, how you say it. Culture's all different now than the 6 generations that I've spent in the league.
Yeah, well, okay, so since you mentioned microphones and media, do you think that it would be good for officials to have a relationship with the media, that not necessarily they have to go through post-game interviews and pre-game interviews for every game and stuff, but on the odd occasion, if there's a call that's controversial is not the right word, but it's a question of how the rule was applied. Would that be helpful in terms of educating and helping fans as well as players? Well,
if the officiating manager's in the building, we'll address that.
Right.
But our guys will have a chat with a writer on the way out. And if it gets to the point where he can't answer it, then our protocol in the National Hockey League is you call Hockey Ops, their department, and Gary Mohar, who does a great job for probably 40 plus years in the PR department, who I know, you know, Gary. We've got great direction from him when and how not to say things because, you know, my dad always told me, if you get engaged in a conversation, there's 3 sides every story. Yours, mine, and the truth.
Which is usually somewhere in between.
And finding the truth, that's the end game. So, but our guys will answer a real, you know, I either got blocked out by a player or, yeah, you know what, I left one out there. Not a bad night. I've only left 1 or 2 out there because my standard's usually 4 or 5. So I'm getting a little bit better.
Right. Yeah. But, and you're right. That's a difficult thing, I think, for fans and parents and for younger officials too, is they're caught up in the emotion, whether it's their son or daughter that's playing, or their husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever and playing, and they get caught up in the emotion with it as well. But you have to remember that the guys and girls wearing stripes are also invested in it. It's not that they're just out taking up space.
Yes, they are. I always tell young officials, those parents that are yelling and screaming and those adults that are yelling and screaming, they're just mad at that jersey you're wearing, because if they knew the individual that was wearing that jersey and they knew your passion and how much you just love the game, that you're out there for the safety of their hockey players, male or female, they probably fall in love with you as a person. But it's that jersey they're constantly mad at.
That's a great point. Let's let Andy back in here because we've kept you on. Apparently he's still here. I kept him on the sidelines for the last little while. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off for questions or anything, Andy. I was having a great chat.
No, I'm enjoying the conversation and listening in, and it's fantastic. And a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, Todd and Don, is you're talking about the NHL guys waiting for that email to get the Stanley Cup playoffs. We have that same thing at the lowest levels of squirt and peewee hockey too.
Sure, yeah.
And we take great pride in identifying some of our young teenage officials that can go out and work that low-level squirt championship game. That's just as important to those kids and those parents. That's the Stanley Cup for them.
Absolutely.
And so we try to. That's one thing that we've tried to do here in Missouri and St. Louis in particular is use that as a motivating factor for these kids to get better. So I think it's the same thing no matter what level we're looking at. But hey, there have been a few more questions if you don't mind, guys.
Go for it.
Sure. The one that I like the best is from our friend Vaughn Upton, who says, any tips or advice on how to choose between being a linesman or a referee? And Don, I would imagine that's a good question for you because you were both at the highest level.
Yeah, you know what, Todd? What do you think, Todd?
I don't know if it's I don't want to break up the fight, so maybe it's better to be a referee
and cause all the fights.
Maybe.
hours. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to get a barrage of text mails if any of our linesmen are hearing this one.
Oh yeah.
But no, it's, you know what it is. It's a personal choice at the beginning. I was just so young. I got hired in the WHA in 1975 as a 19-year-old kid at a north end of Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. I was 19 years old. And I'm out there with Gordie Howe and his two sons and Bobby Halls of the world and Mahovlich and Anders Hedbergs. And I just thought the linesman was the way to go. I didn't referee any amateur hockey. I was too young. And then as I went on, I was a real good student on this. Is a good tip for your officials out there. If you're young and you have aspirations of making a transition from a linesman to a referee, be a sponge. When you're working a game with a senior referee and you're the linesman, be a sponge. Ask questions. Listen in when he's talking to a coach or a senior player or a player with a C or an A on his jersey. Listen in as a linesman. You can learn a lot of things on how they diffuse situations because of their experience. And that's what I did at the National Hockey League. Bob Myers, Bruce Hood, Ron Wicks, and I'd be there with the linesman just listening in and wondering, and I'd ask them in between periods, you know, how'd you get that coach from being 9 out of 10 in the red zone and getting them down to a 5 with you on that same plane? So, and then I made the transition because at 23, 24, they asked me if I wanted to do it. And so I made that choice, but it's a personality thing too. I'm a guy that wants to be, and I'm not afraid to, I want to be the center of the table, the centerpiece on the table. I wanted that. I thrived for that pressure. I thrived for it. I worked hard. I worked hard in October back in the day because I knew Montreal was playing in Quebec City in November. So I worked my butt off because I wanted that regular season game, Montreal, Quebec. So, I mean, it's just some guys are cut out for it. Some aren't. A lot of our lines in the National Hockey League have tried it. And one of the guys lives right there in St. Louis with you, Huddy, Jay Scherers. Jay tried refereeing. He was a successful linesman, had Stanley Cups under his belt, just wasn't cut out for it. Went back and continued and ended with a great career in the National Hockey League as a linesman. So, you know inside whether you have it or not.
There's one more question too, if you don't mind. And I know that this has been talked about on Scouting the Refs, Todd, is how close are we to having women officiating in the NHL? And I know you've talked about that on the podcast before, Todd.
We have, yes. There are a couple of women who have worked as linesmen in development camps and other situations, and I can see it happening one day. I'm not sure how soon it is. I think it's going to be a gradual process. I don't know that it's going to be one or the other. Don, I'd be interested in your opinion on this. I think there will probably be, you'll probably want to introduce 2 or 3 or 4 at the same time, so as all the focus and all the attention and all the pressure isn't just on one individual, I would think.
Now, I know for a fact if last year wasn't the first year out of our combine in Buffalo in August, it was the second year. Mm-hmm. But our minor league staff under Al Kimmel, from that combine camp, I know 2 young ladies, if not 3, 2 for sure went to Traverse City and did the games up there. So those are the guys that are East Coast League, American Hockey League. Some guys might crack the big lineup in the show. And I know that out of the combine, Al and Stephen Walcom are inviting more females to that to expose them. And I know that some of the females did their rookie camps out in Western United States. So yeah, it's on the table. It's being lobbied, and linesman or referee, I don't know. Again, that's a personal choice. I don't think one is any easier than the other. Maybe 20 years ago, I might have said maybe a linesman would be a good stepping stone, but there's so much responsibility they have now. Sure. I mean, their face-offs are probably more important now than the calling of the penalty. The games are won and lost now on poor face-offs. And pressure on players getting hit in the face. Their whole job description has changed dramatically the last 8, 10, 12 years. So I think one day, who knows, maybe a couple exhibition games and we'll see. Who thought we'd have the Europeans over working in our league, and that happened.
They did well.
They've done well.
Yes, that's exactly the comparison I was going to make, is that, we have European officials. It's a worldwide game and it's a worldwide sport, which is one of the things that we love about it, is that it is so worldwide in terms of its attention and stuff. Before we get wrapped up here, and I know we're going to get consumed with time, there's a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. Maybe it's because you were from the East Coast, was Montreal and the Forum, I guess, your favorite building that you officiated in, or did you have another favorite in the league?
You know what? It was my favorite, but I was very fortunate that I worked in all the original 6 buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just, to me, that's a pretty cool stat. I actually was a linesman in the last game played in the old Olympia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was either, I think it was February the 18th. The kids will be out there Googling it, but my memory serves me right. Hartford beat Detroit 6-1, or Detroit beat Hartford 6-1. And that was the last game in the Olympia. And then, of course, I went on to work in the Joe Louis, and didn't get a chance in the new one, but I returned. But yeah, my Chicago was fun. You walk up
the stadium, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and all our dressing rooms were down below, and you'd tell you a funny story. You'd leave your shoes and socks on the floor down in the old basement of the Chicago Stadium, and you'd come back at the end of the first period, and they seem to have moved, or your socks are missing, and all of a sudden you see a rat chasing a mouse who's after a cockroach going in. So it's sort of explain why your socks and underwear moved a little bit from where your shoes were. Yeah, so it just the old building. I mean, the old Boston. I mean, wow, and done some great games in those buildings. Those buildings.
Marvelous. Yeah, those are special. So special buildings. The foundation of the league.
I'm very lucky and privileged guy, seriously, to be sitting here and sharing this with you. I take nothing for granted. It was a privilege to work in the National Hockey League. Just finishing 43 years now. So yeah, I'm a lucky guy. I really, really am.
Now, I wanted to ask you too, because you worked, you said you were trying to, draw back from it a little bit this year, but working as a supervisor, that's a different set of skills that are necessary. Same kind of teaching and mentoring and helping, but just it's a different set of skills that you have working as a supervisor in the league.
No different than coaching a hockey team. I talked to many coaches, and Andy knows I coached AA hockey for 8 or 10 years in St. Louis. I've been a coach in minor hockey, minor lacrosse, but it's about managing people and knowing the people you're managing.
Right.
I remember Coach Q told me in that shortened season when they went on and won all those games, I think they only lost 3 games. And I was just saying to Coach Q, I said, how do you keep these guys motivated? Because I'm coaching AA hockey in St. Louis. I want to pick their brains. And I no sooner said that, Jonathan Tays walked out of the locker room by him. And JT goes by, hey, Coach, hey, Koho, how are you? I said, good. And Coach Q looked at me, he says, that guy right there. He said, you got to lean on your senior players. I could grab him, rip him into a real, not a nice person, wink at him, and then that sets the tone with the other guys. Some guys are soft. You got to pat them on the back and say, hey, Poopsie, things are going to be good. I need you to work again tomorrow in Toronto, so you don't want to kill their confidence tonight in Montreal. So it is a skill set. I agree. It is a skill set, but we have great direction from our department head and Stephen Waltham. And I feel the 10 or 12 guys we have in the field are coaching a lot off the same page, and we're sending the same consistent message throughout our team. But we're only dealing with 64 guys, not tens and hundreds of thousands of young officials across the country.
Right. And Andy, I guess that's maybe something that's part of your camps as well, is that there's always, it's about people management and people skills, whether you're dealing with a coach, whether you're dealing with a player, and how you address them in terms of, and that's part of the development as well.
Absolutely. And I would just encourage everybody that's out there in the hockey world, whether you're an official or a coach or a player, to just maybe take a deep breath and recognize that we're all in this together. And to Koho's point, we all have a passion for the game. I mean, I've been refereeing for more than 30 years myself, and I get as fired up for a peewee game over at Kirkwood Ice Rink, which is about 5 miles from here, Koho, as I do for the Mid-State Championships games down at, the Enterprise Center. And, our officials, they deserve the opportunity to thrive in a safe environment. And I think if people just recognize and understand that, everybody will have a much better experience.
The sole purpose of officials in all sports, two things. Why are we officials? Because we're frustrated players of that sport. Basketball, hockey, doesn't matter. And our number one job is to create a safe playing environment for your daughter and son to play under for that hour or that 3 hours. And I'm talking from the NHL players down to that little squirt house league guy. That's our number one job. Give them a break, go say hello to them, buy them a soda pop once in a while, and get to know the kids.
Really goes a long way just to help encourage and part of the teaching. And there's so much that you can learn. So now there was another Stanley Cup final I wanted to ask you about that I know you were working. 1999, the Dallas Stars were winners of the Stanley Cup.
Buffalo.
Do you wish that you were out on the ice for Game 6 and that overtime goal by Brett Hull, or were you happy to be the backup for that one?
Very observant. You've done your intelligence. I was the standby.
Yeah.
And you know what? I did 11 Stanley Cup Finals, and I've never worked a Game 7 in a Stanley Cup Final. And I was an inch and a big toe away from working a Game 7 in a Stanley. Because up till then, you guys know there wasn't too many Game 7s.
No.
Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, there was single digits for decades. I did lots of Game 7s, lots of deciding games. Yeah, but I was a toe and about an inch away from working Game 7 in that series. And that was a very long night. And I got to give kudos to Brian Lewis, our department head at the time. I believe he was in that Buffalo arena until 4:30 in the morning. And you talk about managing people and media from all around the world. This man did an outstanding job in doing the best he could to diffuse that situation. So kudos to Brian Lewis.
Yeah, great job.
Yeah, I'll never forget that.
Great job by everyone. But it's an illustration too of just how difficult this position is, whether it's at the National Hockey League level, whether it's junior levels, college levels, minor league, house league, it doesn't really matter. They are doing the absolute best that they can with all of the tools that they have available to them.
In a split second, in a nano of a second to make that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give them credit for all that they do. Andy, I want to give you another chance if there's any other questions that we want to squeeze in before we get out of here.
And I just want to go on record. Before we went on the air, we were joking that there's no way you're going to get Don Koharski off the air in 30 minutes. I'm just going on record. My friend here, Todd, sitting in Burlington, he's the one that's prolonged us past 30 minutes. I'm just going on the record. Okay?
I'll accept the blame.
It's not on me.
Okay. Well, and you haven't had a bathroom break yet, Koho, so maybe you do need it.
No, I'm doing good.
Oh, okay. So, but no, I'm just enjoying talking, and then people are still engaged. We don't really have any other questions out there, but I would like to, before we wrap up, Todd, I would like to mention some of our future guests, but
please.
maybe you have one more topic for Koho before we do that, or?
Oh, well, I do. Sure. I've always got another question. I've always got another question, but I wanted to ask about Jamie, who was an official, Don, your son. How interesting and difficult was it to have him follow in the family business, so to speak?
You know what? I think it was probably more difficult for me than him. Not that it was easy for him. Sometimes I think if he was somebody else, different person, different last name or whatever.
Yeah.
But you know what? Jamie had great success to the levels he got at. 13 years in the American League. Then he left there and got into real estate. He had a family here in Tampa, in the real estate, now doing real well. And then he went to work in the NCAA. And his first 4 years in the NCAA did Final Fours every year. He was selected to do Final Four. And then the last couple of years, he went over to the DEL League in Germany.
Right.
Their top league over there, and did a couple of trips over there and did some playoff runs over there. So, I'm very proud of where he went, where he got to. Yeah, and he's in a good place and he's happy, and all is good. All is good.
I want to
me and my referee camps, and he still has his hand in. Does some supervising in the ECHL, works with young officials in the ECHL. We have 3 teams here in the Florida area, so they ask him to go out and do some coaching and mentoring with those kids, and I've seen him do coaching and mentoring, and he does a real good job. He's very passionate about what he does. So no, he's in a good place. I thank you for asking about him.
Oh, that's awesome. You mentioned the ECHL. There's the Orlando Solar Bears, the Florida Everblades are the team near my home, a little further south in Bonita Springs. And I'm glad you had the shout out for Burlington, Ontario, because you were a longtime Burlington, Ontario resident. I grew up here as well. You, via St. Louis, I believe, went through and now reside in Florida. And it must be something in the Burlington water, because it drove me to Florida as well. That's where I'm making my home now.
It's in the Burlington water. It's when it freezes and turns to snow.
I'm going to stay in St. Louis, guys, just for the record. I'm not going anywhere.
Okay.
Hey, Todd, can I just tell a quick story about Jamie that Don might not remember?
Please.
So I was a linesman for Jamie's first ever minor pro game at the St. Charles Family Arena. Do you remember that, Don?
Yeah, I was there.
So Jamie and I were assigned to be the linesman for that game. And 45 minutes, half an hour before the game, the referee hadn't shown up. So we get a phone call from Mitch Lamoureux, if you might remember Mitch, Don. And he's talking to me, and he's saying, I said, "It's okay, Mitch. I've got a local linesman going to get his bag, and I've got orange armbands." So I was now the veteran of the crew. And Mitch says, "Put Jamie on." And how old was Jamie? 17, 18 years old?
Oh, he's a senior in high school.
Yeah. Mitch says, "Put Jamie on." So Jamie takes the phone and he goes, "Hello, Mr. Lamoureux." And he says, "Pardon me, you want me to do what?" Well, wait, Huddy's here. Wait, we'll say that one more time. And he hangs up the phone and he says, "Huddy, he wants me to ref the game." And I said, "Good for you." I took off the orange armbands and gave him to Jamie, and he went out and refereed his first minor pro game as a high school.
Do you remember who did that game? In the first
Was that the 10-minute misconduct?
The team captain.
Okay.
The home team captain. He gave him a 10-minute misconduct.
For shooting the puck away from the linesman, right?
Yeah.
Must not have been me, because I don't remember that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Lots of good stories at all different levels, eh?
That's it. Yes. And strange things like that happen. It's just, okay, well, we don't have a referee, so you're promoted. And well, I guess not in your case, Andy, you weren't promoted.
I was promoting myself, and then I got demoted quickly, which happens.
Be careful, often. Your linesman will be after you. That's not a demotion. It was a lateral movement.
Oh, that's true.
That's right. Okay. Yeah.
I always got your back, Huddy. I always got your back.
Thanks, Cole.
That's awesome. And I'm glad you mentioned too, Don, that you do referee camps and so many other things. Again, another indication of how the referees and officials always try to help, try to give back and offer advice and whether it's through a formal camp or even just a conversation over a coffee or a beverage.
Yeah, we're just hoping for all sakes that we're able to do them this summer. With this crazy stuff that we're going on in our world around us. It'll be our 30th year if we get them done, doing them. And we started back in Burlington. George Harrison in Burlington. I mean, he let Jamie referee as a 9-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah, as a 9-year-old. And I said to George, I don't want you to tell him he's getting paid. I want him to go up there for the right reasons. He says, "Well, it's in the budget. I got to pay him." I said, "Well, save the check until the end of the year. And if he does 10 games, you can give it to him, and he'll put it in his bank account." So Jamie had no idea for 4.5 months that he was getting paid. He was out there 5:30 to 8 a.m. every Saturday and Sunday. And I got to tell you, his mom, he wanted his pants not only pressed, but he wanted the hem sewn in, so he looked professional. And yeah, so at the end of the year, he got a check, and he had, "Dad, what's this all about? What's this for?" I said, "That's for your hard work."
What a great surprise. I trust he wasn't refereeing men's industrial league at 9 years old, though.
No, he's helping left wingers and right wingers get up and get side of the ice.
But what a great introduction and a great way to learn for everyone though to have. And I bet it's got to be good I bet it's got to be great for kids that are not that much older or that much younger to see him out there too. That's an inspiration. Yeah, and the passion he had even back then. So yeah, it was kind of cool. Oh, that's wonderful. Cool stories. Yeah, you're right, Andy. You didn't give me a bill of goods at all. Don's got a whole bunch of stories. It's cool to hear.
Well, yeah, he's a good friend. He's been a good friend of hockey. He's been a good friend of St. Louis hockey, and we loved having him here when he was part of the St. Louis community. Todd, I think we should probably wrap it up. I mean, we've almost gone an entire hour now. But I'd love to have you guys back again, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm game if you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just talk a little bit about our next broadcast real quick. Don, we're bringing Mike McKenna on next week.
Oh, good.
And I know you're a good friend of Mike McKenna. And for those of you that are watching, if you don't know, the Tim Peel referee camp, which I'm involved in with Tim Peel and some other college and minor pro officials here in St. Louis, benefits the Bill McKenna Scholarship Foundation. And Bill McKenna was a founding father of hockey in St. Louis and one of the original members of Missouri Ice Hockey Officials Association. And that's Mike McKenna's grandfather.
Yes.
And we provide some significant scholarships every year for young officials through that effort. And the camp, it's all volunteer. All of us are volunteers for the camp, including Tim Peel. And any of the funds that we raise from the camp, which we have sponsors and whatnot, goes to that scholarship fund. So Mike McKenna is going to hop on. He's going to talk a lot about his grandfather, Bill. He's going to talk a lot about how he played for maybe 22 different minor pro teams. And maybe he'll even talk about his first win.
Well, yeah, because it was a shutout. I still have you tell him, I still have his signed goalie stick up in my attic here. And he actually, I coached him this summer. I had him play on a summer hockey team with us and mentor my youngest son, who was a goaltender. And Mike come down and did that for me. So we have some history. Yeah. And Mr. McKenna was the first guy my son refereed with in the outdoor rink. And I remember what rink it was because when he had Jamie on, it was the one down in the outdoor one in
Kirkwood, Webster.
No, you guys were thinking it was Webster.
Oh,
down by the awful
Shaw Park.
No, it was down where the A&M Mall was on the way to the arena from West County.
Oh,
not
Brentwood. Okay.
The outdoor ring by the Galleria.
Yeah, Shaw Park, Clayton Shaw Park. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, he worked his first game when we moved to St. Louis with Mr. McKenna, the granddad.
Awesome.
Yeah, so kind of cool.
Awesome. Yeah. So anyway,
I can say something closing for me. For anybody that's listening, let's just give a minute here in our night or our evening. Let's just think about these frontline people through this COVID-19, our EMTs, our police officers, our men in uniform, our firefighters, nurses, doctors. Let's just think about those people that are putting their lives on the line every night when they leave their families at home and are doing 12, 24-hour shifts to save tens of thousands of lives. So I'd like to give a shout out to those people, and let's keep our fingers crossed and pray that the scientists and biologists and whoever does all that other stuff finds a vaccine for this. And I know there's sunnier days ahead of us. So let's just give them a thought tonight in our prayers and wish them safe health, them and their families.
Hear, hear.
Well, Todd, do you have any closing thoughts before we sign off?
No, I can't top a great, wonderful sentiment like that. Thanks for asking for me to come on and join. It was a pleasure. It was great. It was a lot of fun, a great conversation.
Awesome,
and I appreciate it, Donna. You were very generous with your time and a lot of fun. And I'm happy to listen and talk to stories with you anytime. You have my contact info going forward. So done.
Well, everybody, and thank you, Todd. Thank you, Don. It's been a pleasure. We'll be talking to you guys soon, and make sure to join us next week, same time, 4:30 Central on Tuesday. with Mike McKenna. Thanks again, guys. Take care.
Thanks,
See you
Andy.
guys.
Thanks, Don.